Name is Ivy, and the moment everything changed happened in a Walmart parking lot in Flagstaff, Arizona on a Tuesday afternoon in July. We were supposed to be on a road trip. My mom had framed it that way. A family adventure, before my older brother started his new job in Denver, and I headed into my second year of community college. 3 days. 2 national parks. 1 motel with a pool. She'd shown me the itinerary on a sticky note like it was something to be excited about. What she hadn't shown me was the plan she and my stepfather had already made before we left home. It started over a parking spot. That's the part I still can't fully wrap my head around. We'd stopped at Walmart to grab snacks and sunscreen, and I'd left my debit card inside my bag in the trunk instead of bringing it in. When I got to the register, I had to go back out to get it. My mom was already annoyed. She'd been annoyed at me for most of the drive. The way she got sometimes. A slow simmer that just needed something small to boil over. By the time I got back inside and paid for my own things, she was standing near the exit with her arms crossed. "You do this every single time," she said, loud enough that the woman at the next register glanced over. "You never think ahead. You never prepare. You act like everyone around you is just supposed to wait." I apologized. I always apologized. But this time, she kept going. "Your stepfather and I have talked about this. You are 20 years old. You should know how to handle yourself by now. Maybe what you need is some real experience, some actual consequences for once in your life." I thought she meant she was going to cut my phone plan or stop covering my car insurance. I didn't think she meant what she actually meant. We walked back to the car. I got in the back seat. My stepfather was behind the wheel, my brother in the passenger seat, neither of them looking at me. My mom got in, closed her door, and before I even had my seatbelt clicked, the car was moving. They drove to the edge of the parking lot. My stepfather put it in park near the exit. And my mom turned around, hand extended, and said, "Get out." I actually laughed. I said, "What?" She said, "You need to learn what it means to be on your own. We'll be back at the motel tonight. Figure out how to get yourself there." The motel was 43 miles away. I know that now. I looked it up later. I sat there for a full 5 seconds, not moving, waiting for someone, my brother, my stepfather, anyone, to say something. My brother stared at his phone. My stepfather stared at the road. My mom looked at me the way she used to look at a pile of laundry she didn't want to deal with. I got out. I don't know why. I think part of me still believed they would circle back before I even reached the curb. They didn't circle back. I stood on the sidewalk outside a Walmart in Flagstaff with my tote bag, my water bottle, $31 in my wallet, and my phone at 62%. The afternoon heat was sitting around 102 degrees. I watched the car pull onto the main road and disappear behind a Denny's sign. What would you do if your own family drove away from you and called it a lesson? If you want to hear how that lesson ended up costing them a lot more than they ever expected, keep watching. And if this is your first time here, my name is Ivy and I want you to subscribe before this story is over. Because what happened 8 years later is something I'm still processing. I didn't call anyone right away. I sat down on the curb near a cart return and drank some of my water and tried to think. I was in a city I didn't know. I had no car. The motel they'd mentioned was a comfort inn near the highway that I didn't even have the address for. I went back inside the Walmart because it was air-conditioned and I needed to stop sweating long enough to think clearly. I sat in the little cafe area near the entrance and opened my Maps app and searched Bus Flagstaff. There was a local transit line and a Greyhound station about a mile and a half away. My phone buzzed. It was my mom. The message said, "Don't be dramatic. You have resources. Use them." That was it. No address. Note, here's the motel name. No, call us when you figure it out. Just don't be dramatic. I looked at that message for probably 2 full minutes. And something shifted. Not a dramatic shift, not a movie moment. It was quieter than that. It was the feeling of a door closing inside me, very gently, and the lock turning. I searched the Greyhound schedule. There was a bus to Phoenix leaving in 4 hours. I didn't take the bus to the motel. I bought a ticket to Phoenix. I arrived in Phoenix at 11:30 at night with $22 left, no plan, and a dead phone. I found an outlet near a vending machine in the station and sat there charging my phone and eating crackers from my bag, watching the station janitor mop the same section of floor 3 times. When I had enough battery, I opened my contacts and scrolled through everyone I knew. Most people I wasn't close enough to call at midnight asking for a place to sleep. But there was one name I kept coming back to. My aunt, my dad's sister, who lived in Tempe. My mom and my aunt had never gotten along. After my parents divorced, contact with that side of the family got complicated. I hadn't seen my aunt in almost 3 years, but she was the only person I could think of who might actually pick up. She picked up on the second ring. She didn't ask a lot of questions on the phone. She just said, "I'm coming. Give me 20 minutes." She pulled up to the Greyhound station in a silver Honda with a dent in the passenger door and a dream catcher hanging from the rearview mirror. She took one look at me and said, "You look like you've been sitting in a parking lot all day." "Close enough," I said. She made me eat leftover pasta when we got to her apartment. She let me use her shower. She set up the couch with a fitted sheet and a real pillow. And then she sat across from me at her kitchen table and said, "Tell me exactly what happened." So I did. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I want you to know that what they did was not normal. It was not tough love. It was not a lesson. It was wrong." She said it plainly without drama, like she was stating a weather forecast. And that plainness was what made it land. She told me I could stay as long as I needed to. She told me she had a friend who managed a sandwich shop 2 blocks away, and they were always looking for people. She told me I didn't have to figure everything out that night. I fell asleep on her couch at 2 in the morning, and for the first time in as long as I could remember, I didn't feel like I had to brace for something. The sandwich shop hired me the next week. It was fast and loud, and the lunch rush was relentless. A line out the door of office workers and college students and construction crews all wanting food at the exact same time. I got fast at it. I got good at reading people's orders before they finished saying them, at keeping track of 6 things at once, at staying steady when everything around me was moving. My aunt's friend, the manager, was a quiet woman in her 50s named Bev, who ran the place with a kind of calm efficiency I'd never seen before. She noticed things. After my second week, she told me I was the quickest study she'd had in years. She said it the same way my aunt had said everything was wrong, matter-of-factly, like it was just the truth, and there was no reason not to say it. I rented a room from a woman in my aunt's building after 2 months. It was small, just a bedroom, and shared access to a bathroom and kitchen. But it was mine. I paid my own rent. I paid my own phone bill. I bought my own groceries and made my own dinners, and did my own laundry at the laundromat, 2 streets over. My mom called twice in that first month. Both times she acted like I was the one who had done something. The first call she said I had overreacted. The second call she said I was hurting the family by staying away. I let her finish talking both times, and then I said I wasn't ready to talk more about it, and hung up. My stepfather didn't call at all. My brother texted once, "You okay?" And when I said I was, he said okay cool. And that was it. That okay cool message sat in my chest for a while. I'm not going to pretend it didn't. But I kept showing up to work. I enrolled in an online business course through a free program the county library offered. I opened a savings account and started putting aside a fixed amount every week, even when it was small. I found that the more I focused on the concrete things, the things I could actually do that day, with what I had, the less space there was for everything else. Bev promoted me to shift lead after 6 months. The raise wasn't huge, but it mattered. I started picking up extra hours on weekends. I wasn't trying to get rich. I was trying to get stable, which felt like a much more immediate goal. About a year into Phoenix, something happened that I didn't expect. I started keeping a record. Not a journal exactly. More like a running document on my phone where I wrote down things I remembered. The Walmart parking lot. The crackers at the bus station. The text that said, "Don't be dramatic." I wrote down what my aunt said the night I arrived. What Bev said about me being a fast learner. What it felt like to pay my first month of rent with money I had earned by myself. I don't know why I started. Maybe because I'd spent so long in a house where the version of events was always shaped by whoever had the most authority in the room, and I wanted to have my own record somewhere. A place where what actually happened was written down and could not be revised. Day 9 in Phoenix. I worked a double shift and made rent for next month. Still haven't cried about it. I think that's either very healthy or very alarming. Day 47. Bev showed me how to close the shop and trusted me with the keys. She doesn't know that no one has trusted me with anything in a long time. Day 203. I put $200 in savings today. It's not much, but I looked at the number in the app for a long time. Time does this thing when you're surviving. It moves differently. Some weeks felt like whole years, others vanished. 2 years passed, then 3. I left the sandwich shop when an opportunity came up at a small logistics company that needed administrative help. I took night classes. I got a promotion. I got another promotion. I moved out of the rented room into a small apartment of my own. I don't want to make it sound like it was a straight line. It wasn't. There were months where I was incredibly lonely. There were nights where I sat in my apartment and thought about calling my mom, not because I wanted to go back, but because I still missed the idea of having a mother who was safe to call. That specific kind of grief, missing someone you're better off without, is hard to explain to people who haven't felt it. But I kept going. Not out of defiance exactly, more out of habit. And then eventually the habit became something else. It became mine. 5 years after Phoenix, I was the operations manager for a mid-size e-commerce company. I had a salary I would not have believed at 20. I had a studio condo. I had a small investment portfolio that I'd built slowly and carefully, with the same energy I'd once put into saving up enough for a bus ticket. My aunt was the only person from my family I stayed close to. She'd come visit sometimes and we'd go to the farmer's market and she'd make fun of how seriously I took everything. And I'd remind her that she was the one who insisted I eat pasta at midnight, so she'd known all along that I wasn't going back. She never pushed me either way. She just made sure I had somewhere to land while I figured out my own direction. It was my aunt who called me the morning the news reached us both. She said, "I don't want to blindside you with this. There's something going around the family group chat that you should probably know about." She told me my stepfather had been laid off, that they'd refinanced their house to cover some debts a couple of years ago, that my mom had taken on some credit card balances that had grown, that my brother, who had never held a job for more than a year and a half, was living with them and not contributing, that they were close, maybe 6 months away, according to what my aunt had heard, from losing the house. I listened without saying anything for a while. Then I said, "Have they reached out to you about it?" My aunt laughed, dry and short. She said, "No. But I think they're about to reach out to you." She was right. The email came 4 days later. The subject line was, "Checking in." My mom wrote that she'd been thinking about me a lot, that she hoped I was doing well, that she was proud of what I'd built. And she meant that sincerely. 3 paragraphs of warmth that felt like something she'd drafted and rewritten several times. And then, in the 4th paragraph, the real reason. She explained about my stepfather's job, about the refinancing, about how things had become very difficult. She mentioned my brother, carefully, like she was choosing words around a bruise, and said he was struggling too, and it had been a hard time for everyone. And she said she didn't know how to ask this, but she was asking. She needed help, financial help. Just a bridge, she said. Just until they found their footing. I read the email 3 times. I noticed what wasn't in it. There was no acknowledgement of Flagstaff. No sorry about the parking lot. No, "I know we hurt you." Just warmth manufactured to open a door she needed something from, and then the ask. I forwarded it to my aunt. She responded in about 90 seconds, predictable. I sat with it for 2 weeks. I talked to a therapist I'd been seeing for about a year. Someone I'd started working with, not because of any crisis, but because I decided I wanted to understand my own patterns before they caught up with me. She asked me what I wanted the outcome of this to be. Not what I owed anyone. Not what was fair. What did I actually want? I thought about it for a long time. And then I called a financial attorney. I explained the family situation in broad strokes. I mentioned that there had been a college savings account set up for me by my maternal grandparents when I was young, a 529 account, meant to cover higher education. I remembered overhearing a conversation when I was about 17 about the account having been used for something, and when I'd asked about it, my mom had changed the subject. I'd never gone to a four-year university. I'd done community college and online courses on my own. The money had just disappeared. The attorney told me to find whatever documentation I could. He said depending on what we found, there might be legitimate grounds for recovering those funds, or at minimum, using their existence as a basis for negotiation. That word again. Negotiation. I called my grandmother, my mom's mom, still alive, still sharp, living in a retirement community in Tucson. We hadn't spoken much, but we'd never been unfriendly. I explained that I was trying to understand finances from when I was growing up, and I asked her if she remembered the savings account she and my grandfather had set up for me. She remembered. She said, "Of course I remember. We put $15,000 in that account when you were born and added to it over the years. I always assumed it went to your schooling. It had not gone to my schooling." We established that quickly. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I see." I told her I wasn't looking to involve her in anything difficult. I just needed confirmation that the account had existed. She said she would send me copies of whatever she could find in her files. 3 days later, a scanned envelope arrived in my email. Inside were two documents: the original account statement from when I was an infant and an annual statement from when I was 12. The balance at 12 was over $22,000. By the time I turned 18, it was gone. I had never seen a dime of it. I replied to my mom's email. I kept it short. I told her I was open to talking, but I said that if we were going to talk about the future, we needed to talk about the past. All of it, including Flagstaff and including the education fund my grandparents had set up in my name that I had never received. I said I had spoken to an attorney and to Grandma. I said I wanted to meet in person, with a mediator or legal representative present, and that it needed to be on the record. I said, if this conversation is actually about making things right, then we can have it. If it's only about the money, save us both the time and don't reply. She replied the next morning. She said they would meet me. Whatever terms I needed. Whatever terms I needed. That phrase landed differently than she probably intended it to. We met at the office of a mediator in Scottsdale, a neutral space, a woman with 20 years of family conflict experience and a voice that made you feel like the room had good weather. My attorney sat beside me. On the other side of the table were my mom, my stepfather, and my brother, who had insisted on coming and who I suspected was more worried about his living situation than anyone else's. My stepfather looked older. My mom looked tired in a way I recognized. It was the same way she looked when she was about to apologize for something but hadn't quite gotten there yet. My brother had his arms crossed and his jaw set like he'd already decided this was unfair. My mom said my name when they walked in. She said I looked good. I said thank you. I didn't say anything else. The mediator opened the session. She explained the framework. Everyone would have a chance to speak. We were here to discuss two things: accountability for past events, and what, if anything, would happen going forward. My attorney laid out the education fund situation first. The documents, the timeline, the discrepancy between what was in the account at age 12 and what was there at 18, which was nothing. My mom's face went through several things quickly. My stepfather stared at the table. We used some of it during a hard year, my mom said finally. We meant to pay it back. The mediator asked, did Ivy know the funds were being used? No, my mom said quietly. Did she consent to it? No. Was she informed afterward? Silence. The mediator made a note. My brother exhaled loudly. He said, can we not make this into a trial? They made a mistake. We get it. We're all here, aren't we? I looked at him. I said, you weren't there in Flagstaff either. He looked away. I had written down what I wanted before the meeting. 3 things, in order: The first was repayment of the education fund. Not the $22,000 from when I was 12, the adjusted figure, accounting for what it could have grown to had it been invested as intended. My attorney had calculated this. It was a specific number. My mom closed her eyes when she heard it. My stepfather asked if they could pay it in installments. My attorney said we could structure that. The second was a written statement. I had drafted it myself and had my attorney review it. It was a single page. It said that on a specific date in July, in a Walmart parking lot in Flagstaff, Arizona, my mother and stepfather had intentionally left me without transportation, without the address of the motel they were staying at, and without any follow-up to confirm I was safe. It said this was not an agreed-upon arrangement or a miscommunication. It said it was wrong. I slid it across the table. My mom picked it up. She read it slowly. I watched her eyes move down the page. My brother muttered something under his breath. My stepfather sat very still. My mom said, "You want us to sign this?" "Yes," I said. She looked at me for a long moment. Not with anger. With something more tired than that. She said, "If I sign this, is it going to be used against us publicly?" I said, "It will be kept with my attorney. If you come after me publicly, if any of you tell a version of this story that contradicts what happened, he will be authorized to release it. But if you leave it alone, it stays sealed." My brother said that was blackmail. My attorney explained calmly that it was a standard protective measure and that they were free to decline and proceed through formal legal channels instead, which would be significantly more expensive and time-consuming for everyone in the room. My brother went quiet. My mom picked up the pen. Her hand was shaking slightly. She signed it. She slid it to my stepfather. He signed it without reading it again. My brother refused to sign it, which was fine. It only required them. The third thing. I told them I was buying their house, not as a gift, not as charity, as a transaction. I would pay off the remaining mortgage balance and take the deed. They would have 60 days to move out. The amount I paid would be credited against what they owed me for the education fund, reducing their installment payments accordingly. The house itself. I already knew what I was going to do with it. I'd been thinking about it since before the meeting. My aunt's neighborhood had a crisis response nonprofit that worked with young adults who'd been kicked out or aged out of systems, young people who needed a temporary safe place while they stabilized. I was going to donate the property to them, convert the space into transitional housing. My mom asked why I wanted the house if I wasn't going to live in it. I said, because it was partly funded with money that was meant for me. I'm redirecting it towards something that actually helps people who needed more than they were given. She didn't respond to that. I think there wasn't really anything to say. Before we left, my mom asked if we could have a few minutes. Just the two of us. The mediator asked if I was comfortable with that. I said yes. The others filed out. The room was very quiet. My mom sat across from me with her hands flat on the table and she said, "I know we can't fix it. I know that what we did was not a lesson. I know that now. I think I knew it then, too. And I did it anyway, and I've had to live with that." I looked at her. I believed her, I think. I believed that she meant it, in that room, in that moment. But I'd spent too many years understanding the difference between what someone means and what they do for meaning alone to feel like enough. I said, "I appreciate you saying that." She said, "Will you ever?" And then she stopped herself. I said, "I don't know." And that's the most honest answer I have. We didn't hug. We didn't make plans. She walked to the door and then paused and said, "I'm glad you got out of that parking lot." "Me too," I said. It was the only accurate thing left to say. The house transfer was completed 2 months later. I walked through it once before signing it over to the nonprofit. The rooms were emptied out, the walls bare, the carpet still holding the faint outline of where the furniture had been for years. I stood in the kitchen for a while. I thought about the girl who'd eaten cereal at that counter every morning and been made to feel like she was too much, too careless, too much trouble to take with you. She had figured it out. Just not in the way anyone intended. The nonprofit started using the house about 3 months after the transfer. I went to the small opening event they hosted. There were maybe 15 people there, staff, a few volunteers, a couple of young adults who would be the first residents. One of them was 19. She had bright sneakers and tired eyes, and she held her paper cup of lemonade like she wasn't quite sure she was allowed to be comfortable yet. I knew that feeling exactly. I didn't tell her my story. It wasn't the moment for it, but I stayed until the end of the event and helped fold up the chairs, and on my way out I said to the program coordinator that if they ever needed anything, to reach out. People ask me sometimes whether it was worth it, the legal process, the meeting, the whole thing, whether getting what I was owed actually changed anything. I think the honest answer is that the money mattered practically, and the statement mattered symbolically. But the thing that mattered most was something harder to quantify. For a long time, the story of what happened in that parking lot existed only in my mom's version, which was that I had overreacted, that they had meant it as a push, that I was always difficult. That version had weight because it was the only one that was ever said out loud. Now there's a signed document in my attorney's file that says something different. It says what actually happened. It says it was wrong. And even if no one else ever reads it, I know it exists. I know that what I lived through has a record now that cannot be revised. I kept showing up for my own life for 8 years, before anyone in that family acknowledged what they'd done. I paid my own rent. I made my own calls. I figured out, slowly and quietly, who I was when no one was watching, and no one was around to tell me I was doing it wrong. Turns out that version of me is the one I actually like. So let me ask you something. If the people who were supposed to protect you came back years later needing something from you, would you help them unconditionally? Would you walk away completely? Or would you do what I did and make sure the truth was finally part of the equation? Tell me in the comments. I read all of them. And if this story hit somewhere real for you, hit subscribe, because I'm not done talking about it. I've thought a lot about cause and effect since that July afternoon in Flagstaff, not in a mystical way. I don't think the universe was keeping score or that some invisible force engineered justice on my behalf. I think it's simpler and more human than that. I think what you do to people has weight, and weight, eventually, lands somewhere. My mom believed that leaving me in that parking lot would produce a specific result, that I would panic, beg, fall back into line, and come home grateful for the lesson. What she didn't calculate was that I might choose a different direction entirely, that the same stubbornness she'd always called a flaw in me would turn out to be the thing that kept me moving when I had no real reason to keep going. You can't engineer someone else's response to pain. You can only apply the pressure and hope it breaks them the way you planned. She applied the pressure. I didn't break the way she expected. That's the whole story, really. Underneath all the legal documents and signed statements and transferred deeds, what I've come to understand about resilience is that it isn't something you have or don't have. It's something that gets built in the gap between what you expected and what actually happened. I expected my family to come back. They didn't. I had to build a whole life inside that gap. And because I had to build it from scratch, no safety net, no inherited stability, no cushion of family money, every part of it was something I actually understood. I knew how every dollar came in. I knew what each promotion had cost me in hours and study and early mornings. Nobody could tell me I didn't earn it because I had been there for every single step. My aunt showed me something important too, without meaning to. She showed me that choosing to show up for someone is its own kind of integrity. She didn't owe me anything. She hadn't caused what happened. She just picked up the phone at midnight and drove to a bus station and made pasta. That's it. And that small, quiet decision changed the entire arc of my life. I think about that when people talk about whether individual choices matter. They do. Of offering me a job mattered. My aunt driving across the city mattered. Small acts of basic human decency matter enormously to someone who has just been shown what the absence of it looks like. The education fund is the part that still sits with me in a complicated way. I was a baby when my grandparents set that money aside. They were imagining a future for me. College, opportunity, a head start. My mom used it for bills and never said a word. I don't think she thought of it as stealing exactly. I think she thought of it as borrowing from a future that would sort itself out. But futures don't sort themselves out. People sort them out, slowly, painfully, with a lot of help they have to go find for themselves. The money was gone before I ever had a chance to use it. I built the same future without it. And then I used what I recovered to give someone else a head start instead. That feels like the right ending to that particular chapter. What I'd tell anyone going through something like this, and I know some of you watching are, is that the path out of it isn't revenge exactly. It's clarity. Get clear on what actually happened. Write it down. Find one person who treats you like you're worth something. Do the next small thing. And then the next one. The weight of what was done to you doesn't disappear. But it can change shape. It can become the reason you know exactly how to show up for yourself and eventually how to show up for someone else. That's what no return means to me now. Not a door slammed shut. A direction chosen on purpose.